In the philosophical debates of ancient Greece, there is a question that has endured for centuries: the Ship of Theseus. If a ship's wooden planks are replaced one by one until none of its original parts remain, is it still the same ship? This puzzle does more than challenge our understanding of an object. It unsettles our beliefs about identity and continuity. It compels us to reconsider what we mean by essence, what we mean by change, and where exactly the boundary lies between what endures and what transforms. Yet this is not merely an abstract thought experiment from the past. A similar confusion exists within language itself. When the meanings of words gradually shift over time, when we continue to use the same terms but fill them with entirely new content, are we still saying what was originally meant? Might language, like that ship, be quietly and completely replaced, without us even noticing? Hi everyone, I'm Eric, a cat who dreams of becoming a philosopher. This is the place where I share my thoughts and explore new ideas with you all. So let's dive into today's topic. The story of the Ship of Theseus can be traced back to ancient Greek accounts. According to legend, the people of Athens preserved the vessel in which the hero Theseus returned from his voyage, keeping it as a memorial to his bravery. As the years passed, the ship's wooden planks began to decay. One by one, the caretakers replaced the rotting timber with new boards. Day after day, year after year, the process continued until eventually every single component of the ship had been renewed. None of the original material remained. And yet, people still called it the Ship of Theseus. This situation gives rise to a profound philosophical question. When all the parts that compose an object have been replaced, does it still retain its original identity? At the heart of the issue lies the concept of sameness, or identity. If identity depends on the continuity of material substance, then once the original timber has disappeared, it would seem that the original ship has vanished with it. But if identity depends instead on form, structure, or function, then as long as the overall shape and purpose remain unchanged, the ship may still be regarded as the same vessel. The tension between matter and form thus becomes central to the debate. What philosophers are truly arguing about here is not merely physical replacement, but the very foundation upon which identity is established. The puzzle deepens further with an additional thought experiment. Suppose someone carefully collected the discarded planks and reassembled them, reconstructing a ship from the original materials. Which, then, would be the true Ship of Theseus? The vessel that continued uninterrupted through constant repair, or the one rebuilt from the authentic, original timber? This scenario reveals that identity involves not only matter and form, but also temporal continuity and historical context. If we emphasize an unbroken history, then the ship that was never out of existence seems more deserving of the title. Yet if we value the authenticity of original material, the reconstructed ship appears closer to the real one. The two standards conflict, and yet each holds its own persuasive force. The reason this question has endured for centuries is that it exposes a deep tension within human thought. We long for things to possess stable identities, so that we may recognize them and speak about them with certainty. Yet the world around us is in constant flux. Living organisms continually replace their cells through metabolism. Social institutions reform and reinvent themselves. Even a person's memories and character shift over time. If we apply a strict material standard, perhaps nothing remains entirely unchanged over the long term. And yet, in everyday life, we naturally assume that a particular person, city, or system remains the same entity. The Ship of Theseus, then, is not merely about a vessel. It is about how we define essence and identity. It forces us to search for criteria between change and permanence, and it reveals that what we call continuity may in fact be a conceptual construction. When this insight is extended into the realm of language and thought, its implications become even more far-reaching. For language itself is the tool by which we define the world, And once the tool begins to change, our understanding of the world may begin to shift with it. As language evolves, the same word often comes to carry very different meanings, and the shift is not always obvious. Take the word net. In the past, it referred primarily to something physical, an object woven from rope or fiber, such as a fishing net or a trap for birds. It had a definite shape and a practical function. You could see it, you could touch it. It belonged to the tangible world. Yet, with the development of modern technology, the term network began to describe systems of connection between pieces of information. Before long, this was shortened in everyday speech. We speak of surfing the net, of net users, of netizen. The word net no longer points chiefly to a physical object, but to an abstract and virtual space. The written form has not changed, but the world it refers to has changed completely. What once emphasized interwoven fibers and physical structure has been extended to mean nodes and connections within an information system. This transformation did not happen overnight. It settled gradually through countless acts of use and understanding. Today, when someone mentions the net, what comes to mind is unlikely to be fishing gear drying by the seaside. It is far more likely to be the signal icon on a mobile phone or a social media platform glowing on a screen. A similar shift can be seen in the word ship. Traditionally, a ship is a vessel that sails upon water. It is closely associated with seas and rivers, with sails and trade routes, with voyages of exploration. The word carries centuries of maritime imagination. Yet, in the age of space exploration, the term spaceship was coined. It borrows the familiar concept of a ship, but detaches it from water and launches it into the vacuum of the cosmos. We use an old word to describe an entirely new invention. This naming strategy helps comprehension, but it also subtly alters the boundaries of the word itself. A ship is no longer confined to the surface of the sea. It becomes a broader symbol, a vehicle that carries people or cargo through a particular environment, whether ocean or outer space. When a child first hears the word spaceship, they are unlikely to question why it does not float on water. Language has already completed the transfer of meaning. What we see then is that the same word, used in different eras and contexts, profoundly different concepts. The outer shell of language remains intact, giving the impression that meaning is stable. In reality, its inner content is reshaped by technological and cultural change. This is not merely the addition of new definitions. It is a gradual rewriting of earlier understandings, a transformation that occurs under the appearance of continuity. When people of different generations or professional backgrounds use the same word, they may not be imagining the same thing at all. Surface agreement can conceal deep divergence, and misunderstandings quietly arise. Language thus enters a condition strikingly similar to the Ship of Theseus. The form of the word appears unchanged, yet its components of meaning are steadily replaced over time. Once we recognize, we become more cautious about what we call consensus. Beneath a single shared term, there may exist multiple, shifting worlds. Language is not a fixed system of unchanging symbols. It is a living structure, moving with time and shaped by the society in which it exists. When social experience changes, when our understanding of the world shifts, language adjusts accordingly. New inventions demand new names. Old ideas are reinterpreted, and familiar words are given fresh meanings. These changes are often gradual, almost imperceptible. Yet accumulated over decades, they can transform the very core of a word's significance. Language therefore exists in a curious state. It appears stable on the surface, while beneath that surface its content is constantly in motion. The outward form of a word remains, but its inner meaning is quietly renewed by history. Such change may be driven by technological progress, but it may also be shaped by political and cultural forces. When certain words are repeatedly used within particular contexts, their emotional tone and implied judgment begin to shift. A term that was once neutral can, through media repetition and public discourse, acquire either positive or negative connotations. In time, people's instinctive reactions to that word differ from those of previous generations. The dictionary definition may remain untouched, yet lived understanding has already moved on. Language carries not only information, but also attitude and position, and these additional layers often exert more influence than the literal meaning itself. Moreover, the simplification and compression of language alters the depth of meaning. In an age of rapid communication, complex ideas are frequently reduced to brief labels. When labels replace careful discussion, words begin to carry excessive emotional weight while losing precision. Different groups, guided by their own values, may attach entirely different meanings to the same term. On the surface, everyone appears to be discussing the same issue. In reality, they may be addressing entirely different concerns. When dialogue rests upon such unstable foundations, misunderstanding and conflict easily follow. It is also worth noting that language does not merely reflect reality, it shapes it. When a concept is renamed, its position within public debate shifts. If a behavior is framed in positive terms, it is more readily accepted. If it is branded with a negative label, it may be rejected outright. The way something is named influences emotional response, and emotional response can influence policy and social attitude. Here, language is not simply a descriptive tool. It becomes a framework with guiding power. Through the words we choose, often unconsciously, we construct our view of the world. In those choices, we may even draw the boundaries of our own stance. Thus, linguistic change is not merely a natural evolution. It is a process interwoven with power, perception, and culture. It can deepen understanding, yet it can also blur distinctions. When we fail to notice these shifts, we may assume we still stand upon shared ground. In truth, the meanings of our words may already have drifted. Just as the Ship of Theseus continues to be called the same ship after all its planks have been replaced, language preserves its outward appearance while its components of meaning are steadily exchanged. Without reflection, we may not realize that the very tool upon which we rely to interpret reality has subtly altered its course, and in doing so, has quietly reshaped our understanding of the world itself. In literature, the manipulation of language is often portrayed in extreme form, allowing us to see its dangers more clearly. In 1984, George Orwell imagines a totalitarian society in which the state deliberately engineers language itself. Through the creation of newspeak, vocabulary is reduced and concepts are reshaped, making it increasingly difficult for citizens to articulate ideas of resistance or freedom. Within this world, meanings are systematically altered. Things once regarded as good are gradually portrayed as harmful. As linguistic choices are compressed, the space for thought narrows with them. Words that once symbolized hope and liberation are redefined as sources of danger and disorder. Language ceases to be a medium for expressing truth and becomes instead a mechanism for controlling it. The novel's famous slogans declare that war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. These reversals are not mere rhetorical flourishes. They represent a deliberate reconstruction of concepts. When people are exposed to such language over long periods, their moral compass may begin to shift. Values once worth pursuing are reframed as threats to stability. Forms of oppression that should provoke alarm are pre-packaged as guarantees of order and security. By rewriting language, the coordinates of morality are quietly redrawn. A similar pattern appears in Animal Farm. At the outset, the animals overthrow human rule in pursuit of equality and freedom. Yet as power becomes concentrated in the hands of a few leaders, their original commandments are gradually altered. The 7 commandments painted on the wall are subtly amended, A word added here, a phrase adjusted there. The sentences look almost the same, yet their meaning changes profoundly. This process is not simply about broken promises. It is about the rearrangement of language itself. Words that once embodied shared ideals are transformed into tools for justifying privilege. When the animals attempt to recall the original slogans, they struggle to determine whether their memories are faulty or whether the wording has truly been changed. These two works reveal a common truth. When language is consciously manipulated, concepts begin to slide. Words with positive associations may acquire negative undertones, while injustice and deprivation are dressed in the language of legitimacy. Over time, people may even internalize the shift, believing that such revisions are merely necessary adjustments to reality. Here, language does not merely reflect power, it becomes one of its central instruments. The warning offered by these stories is clear. We must remain attentive to the conceptual changes hidden behind familiar words. When the phrases remain the same but their meanings have been redefined, a lack of discernment may lead us to accept an altered system of values without realizing it. Like the Ship of Theseus, language may appear unchanged from the outside, while its internal structure has been replaced piece by piece. And as that structure shifts, so too may our understanding of what is good, what is harmful, and what we ought to defend. When the meanings of words begin to shift unnoticed, we must remain alert, first and foremost because communication itself is at risk. Communication depends upon shared understanding, and shared understanding depends upon a basic agreement about what words mean. Once that agreement begins to fracture, two people may use exactly the same language and yet fail to understand one another. On the surface, the conversation appears smooth. In reality, each side is interpreting the words differently, and misunderstandings accumulate in silence. This problem becomes even more pronounced between different groups. Generational differences, professional backgrounds, and cultural experiences all shape how words are interpreted. A term that carries positive associations within one community may hold painful or negative historical echoes within another. If neither side recognizes this divergence, discussion can quickly turn into conflict. Each believes the other is distorting their meaning, while overlooking the fact that their semantic foundations were never identical to begin with. When such gaps remain unaddressed, trust gradually erodes. There is also a more practical concern. The ambiguity and drift of language create opportunities for deception. Fraud often relies upon words that carry reassuring connotations: guarantee, investment, partnership, exclusive opportunity. These terms evoke security and credibility. Because the words themselves feel trustworthy, people may be less inclined to verify the details. If a deceiver deliberately employs vague or multi-layered language, allowing the listener to project their own hopeful assumptions onto it, the manipulation becomes even more effective. In such cases, language ceases to transmit facts. It becomes a tool for managing expectations. On a broader scale, when society as a whole begins to diverge in its understanding of key terms, the foundations of public discussion weaken. Policy debates, moral evaluations, and ethical questions all require relatively clear concepts. If the meanings of core words fragment, dialogue loses focus. People appear to be arguing about the same issue, yet, in truth, they are responding to entirely different questions. Over time, social consensus becomes increasingly difficult to achieve, and discussion deteriorates into mutual accusation. For these reasons, we must be attentive to linguistic change, not in order to preserve some artificial purity of vocabulary, but to safeguard honest and effective communication. When we suspect that a word may have undergone a shift in meaning, we should clarify what we mean by it and seek to understand how others are using it within their own context. Only after establishing a shared conceptual foundation can genuine dialogue begin. Otherwise, we risk standing on two ships that look identical from the outside, but differ entirely in structure, each convinced we are sailing in the same direction, while in fact drifting steadily apart. In contemporary public debate, the words equality and privilege often appear side by side, yet they point to complex and multi-layered ideas. Traditionally, equality has meant that individuals are treated the same under the same conditions, without discrimination based on identity or background. It emphasizes consistent rules and equal rights. However, as societies have become more aware of disparities in starting points, differences in resources, opportunities, and historical circumstances, another argument has emerged. This view holds that granting certain groups special arrangements may be necessary to compensate for past disadvantages, thereby achieving what is sometimes described as substantive equality. Within this framework, privilege is no longer seen solely as the unfair monopolization of benefits by a few. Instead, it is redefined as a corrective measure, a means of addressing injustice. Yet, linguistic shifts do not merely add nuance. They can gradually replace earlier understandings. When the granting or possession of privilege becomes linguistically equated with the realization of equality itself, the original emphasis on equal rules and equal rights may be overshadowed. By reframing the language, distinctions between formal equality and compensatory measures can blur until the two are treated as identical. In certain contexts, privilege ceases to be viewed as an exception and becomes instead a symbol of equality, even a benchmark by which equality is measured. Within such a climate, confusion easily arises. Support argue that this linguistic evolution advances justice by highlighting care for disadvantaged groups and acknowledging historical responsibility. Critics, however, may contend that the shift obscures important distinctions, rendering previously clear principles ambiguous. Both sides use the word equality, yet they often rest upon different philosophical foundations. One prioritizes equality of outcome, narrowing the gap in results. The other emphasizes equality of process, maintaining consistent procedures and standards. When compensatory policies are described simply as equality itself, the conceptual difference between principle and method may fade from view. There is also a moral dimension to this transformation. Once a particular arrangement is labeled equality, it acquires powerful legitimacy. Once a particular arrangement is labeled equality, it acquires powerful legitimacy. Those who question the arrangement may appear to be opposing equality as a value. Language thus exerts a guiding force. Debate about specific measures is subtly reframed as a test of loyalty to an ideal. In this way, language does not merely describe policy, it reorganizes the criteria by which policy is judged. The relationship between equality and privilege therefore illustrates how words can retain their outward form while their inner meaning is gradually reshaped. When privilege is presented as the necessary embodiment of equality, the core concept may undergo a quiet replacement. Such a transformation is not automatically right or wrong. But without careful definition, public discussion risks losing clarity. People of differing perspectives may construct entirely different interpretations beneath the same shared term, assuming they stand on common ground when in fact they do not. In such circumstances, returning to conceptual analysis becomes essential. We must distinguish between equality as a principle and privilege as a possible instrument, and honestly confront the trade-offs and limitations involved. Only by maintaining clarity and transparency at the level of language can discussion move beyond slogans and emotion. Otherwise, equality may become a broad umbrella under which many arrangements are sheltered, while privilege acquires renewed legitimacy through linguistic transformation. And as concepts are steadily reshaped, we must ask ourselves whether we have quietly replaced their original meaning, while still believing we are defending the same ideal. From the Ship of Theseus to the transformations of contemporary language, we can observe a shared phenomenon. The continuity of outward form does not guarantee the stability of inner meaning. As words gradually replace their conceptual components over time, we may, if unreflective, accept entirely different understandings beneath familiar phrases. The vocabulary remains recognizable. The structure appears intact. Yet, what those words point to may have quietly shifted. Language is not only a tool of thought, it is also a carrier of values. Through it, we frame our beliefs, shape our judgments, and define what we consider good, just, or true. For that reason, attentiveness matters. Only by remaining sensitive to conceptual change, by pausing to ask what we truly mean and what others understand, can we stay intellectually awake amid constant transformation. Otherwise, like observers of the Ship of Theseus, we may continue to speak as though nothing is altered, while the meaning we rely upon has already been replaced piece by piece, and with it, our grasp of the very ideas we believed we were. That's all for this video. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and comment. Every like, subscribe, and comment are a contribution to solving those difficult questions. I look forward to your joining our discussion and making a contribution to solving the difficult questions. Once again, thank you for your watching. Goodbye.